Okay. Hey, and welcome to another episode of The Influential Nonprofit. I'm your host, Mary Anders, and we talk about how to ask for and receive all you want, need, and deserve without being ineffective or pushy or any of the things that we don't like to be. Really, what we talk about in this show is how to build aligned, honest, authentic, transparent relationships with the people who support our work. And I am here with my new best friend, Perry Radford. And we're going to talk about fundraising and the ethics and values around fundraising and what that looks like. And I'm excited to get into this conversation because I know we have a lot in common already. Before, I'm going to have you give yourself a little intro, but before I do that, Perry, I'm just going to say you are a consultant and coach. You help nonprofits develop strategy, systems, and relationships that improve their fundraising yield, and you believe in creating environments that nurture time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties. We're going to get into that and honor how each person is uniquely suited to make a difference within their community. I love all of that. Hi, Perry, and welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you are a consultant, a coach and consultant. What does that mean to you?
What it means to me is, I can show up and help a team with a special project, but I want to teach a man how to fish,
Yeah.
right? I am a strong believer that we can talk as much about the work as we like, but if there's no change management, if there's no change in behavior, there's no addressing culture, it's all for naught. We are here to be essentially divergent thinkers in the nonprofit space because we are trying to change the world here, right?
Yes.
So we need some systems, processes, ideologies to support us in doing that.
Yeah. And I really love what you said because I do not call myself a consultant. I'm a coach and trainer, but I think coaching is so important because it does address what you're talking about. The mindset, right? The culture, all of the what we consider intangibles, which are actually incredibly tangible because strategy by itself with right, if strategy will not make change. It's strategy and mindset and culture like all working together. That's what creates sustainable change.
100%.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, I love this idea of how each person is uniquely suited to make a difference within their community. The time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties. I love this concept and a nice alliteration, by the way. So tell me more about that.
Well, I'm not the first person to say that. I know other people have said that, but what I think about we have in common when we do this kind of third sector work is we're all people with big moral imaginations. We're people who dream of a better world. We're also individuals, so that means we have different personalities, different values, and different assets that we bring to this work to enact that change. So I like to talk about the five T's because even though I'm a fundraiser and my focus has often been on securing the bag, as some would say, getting that treasure, people who show up to give, they often don't just want to write a check. They want to do whatever they can to help a cause that means something to them. I know that's true for me and the ways I give and I show up in
Absolutely.
community. And I think from the donor perspective, you get this really weird transactional experience when you become a supporter of an organization. You want to give, whatever you have to help, and you're told, well, if you want to volunteer, that's different. Funder people who give can't volunteer. Donors and volunteers stay away from each other, and um, it's just really close-minded, and it's something that diminishes people and flattens people to
Hmm.
say that you're only here because we want you to give the one asset we value.
Yes.
It's not what we're here to do,
It's
right? We're
not.
dreamers.
Yes. And if we say we don't want donors to feel like ATMs, then stop treating them like one, right? Like then stop treating them only for money. Or like one of the things I talk a lot about is this idea of, oh, if I reach out 7 times, then they're gonna like, okay, people aren't robots. Yes, I know there's data to support like a certain level of exposure. And also, people aren't like robots. And one of the things that I talk about all the time is relationship first, money will follow. If I'm making friends with you because you have money, that's manipulative at worst and disingenuous at best. I'm making a relationship with you because we have values that are aligned. We share the same vision. We want to see the same change. And from that, a lot can come because if we only focus on money, you're going to miss everything else, right? Like all the other assets, they all work together.
Exactly. It all goes down to let's stop flattening people. Let's treat volunteers and donors with the same level of respect. Let's not just keep putting money on this pedestal because fundamentally, when we look at like the broad scope of nonprofits and the service they offer to their community, there are so many ways people actually are making a difference and they are connecting with others and they are giving something valuable to each other that isn't just writing that check.
Yeah, exactly. And what the reason they write the check is because of all those other things, right? Like they're writing the check because they feel valued, right? They feel like treasured. You know what I mean? They feel part of something bigger than themselves. They don't do it, for a transactional reason. They do it for a transformational reason. And that's what I do. That's what you do, right? Like I feel I call it the philanthropic heart. So like why I care about a cause is about my lived experience, not really somebody's marketing, and I'm a marketer. Like so okay, so I mean it's not like, oh, I said the exact right words. That's why somebody's giving because it's calling to something that's already inside them that's been probably planted there since childhood.
100%. And, as a fundraiser, when we talk to donors and prospects, people really open up because those reasons, those experiences that guided them to be connected with your org or your mission or cause, it's something that means something to them. And so when we talk about being partners with our donors, part of that partnership is understanding who they are as an individual, respecting that, seeing where we have something in common.
Yeah. I say we love people for who they are, not what they can do for us or what they have, right? And if you start there, and even if they're not a right fit or whatever, they'll still respect you for seeing them as individuals, not a check, a human checkbook. Because I felt like that in situations, maybe not around money, but around where people just want one thing from you. Does it feel good?
Nope. Everyone wants to be acknowledged. It's pretty simple.
It is. It is. Okay. So, if you say I am a pretty, the world's pretty crazy right now, okay? And I'm a little bit stressed out, development director or executive director. What would you say, like, what wisdom would you have for somebody who feels like there's never enough money, time, or any of the things that they want?
Yeah, I mean, scarcity culture is so ingrained into the nonprofit world that I think it's really easy to just accept that it's baked in and this is the way it has to be. Or it's easy to overlook that that isn't really what drives outcomes. That isn't what drives connection. That isn't what drives impact. What it does drive is burnout and people losing themselves to their work because the
Hmm.
mission is so
Hmm.
important. And I think a lot of us have put ourselves in that position where we felt like we really have to give a lot, sacrifice a lot for our mission, for our organization. But I also think fundamentally, after you've gone through that experience, you're left with a chip on your shoulder because you know that's really just not effective.
Right.
It's not good for your soul, it's not good for your community, and it's not effective.
Yes. It is not sustainable, right? It's yes. I love that. I do think that scarcity culture is really pervasive. I feel like I see a shift. It's going to be slow because it's a cultural shift to understanding that the idea of abundance and that we can share, that there's enough. The scarcity myth, I think, has done a lot of damage to the industry and to just our collective self-esteem. Um, and hopefully that can be shifting because you're right. It's not effective. You'll burn out. And we just tell ourselves the story like, oh, this is how it is. It's just really hard in this, and it doesn't like if that's the story you tell yourself, that's what's going to be true.
Yeah, and I think that's why there are a lot of critics of the nonprofit sector, saying that it's just here to make people feel good. It's not actually here to enact change. And as long as we're stuck in that scarcity mindset, not a transformation mindset, trying to be everything to everyone, trying to be saviors, we're not really going to be in partnership and community and connection with others and actually uh, change the things around us that aren't serving us.
Exactly. Ah, I love that so much. Okay, so your company is called Rad Philanthropy. What made you want to start this business?
It was quite a journey for me to come here. I think I've talked to a lot of folks about my vision quest, where after being in a long job search, getting some offers that just weren't quite right, and having been somebody who, I think I got my first work permit when I was 12. I have always worked.
Wow.
Yeah, I quit a job without another job, and I took time off to heal the burnout,
Hmm.
try to just be, try to rework that sense of identity that was so built into my job. And when I was able to foster some of that openness, as I like to say, get kind of weird, do some things I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, um, it really seemed to me that this was a path I was getting called towards. And the rest is history, I guess.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And I've neglected to do something, and people who listen to this are probably already calling me out on this because I usually open with this one question, but I got so excited about what
Mm,
we were going to talk about. So, with having said all that, I would love for you to tell me one thing that you are really proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
yeah, I listened to some episodes and I heard you say that, and I thought, I should prepare for
And
that.
I didn't do
Now,
it.
now it's all
Oh,
coming back
now
to
it's all
me.
coming back. Yeah.
There's a lot of things that I thought about when I heard you ask that. And one of the things that was unexpected for me when I did go through that Vision Quest experience and decide to start my business was at about the same time, by chance, I got sick. And I have remained sick, and I would say have become disabled. I think of myself as somebody with a dynamic disability. So, I'm dynamic over here. It's always different. You never know what to expect. And that shift into seeing myself that way, accepting myself that way,
Mm,
going through huge life changes. Me and my husband were also planning to move states, and we did. And, all of this is happening. Starting a business, that is a lot to carry personally, let alone, my connections to my family, my friends, my community, what's going on across our country right now. That's a lot to carry. So I'm proud of myself for owning that transformation. I'm feeling more ready to talk about it publicly because there is a lot of shame around chronic illness and disability, and it's actually a really common experience. And I would love for people to feel like they can be acknowledged with that experience.
yeah. So that's so interesting. I want to witness two things that you just said. First is just taking that space between A and B, right? Because we tend to want to rush my to A and B. And my husband just went through a job change. He does biotech startups, and like how it works is the data's going to do what the data's going to do, right? They give you a bunch of money and they say go prove it. And if you can't prove it, then it's no like this is just the price, right? So he wound up landing this other job. But it's like that space in between. It's like so scary. Like, oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? I'm like, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Like, but for you, the worker is like, hey, let's just open this up and see what comes up and see what comes up for me. And I feel like that is such a good thing. And I really love when people do that because that's where the ideas come from. That's where the shifts come from. They don't come from the motion, they come from the stillness, right?
Mm,
And then now you have this chronic condition where, I don't, if I speak out of, like you're almost forced to like in a way, you rewrite like, okay, I'm moving at this certain pace now, and that's okay. And I still, and I'm still operating and still get done. But I just feel like this idea of maximum crushing it, every day, like it doesn't have to be that way, especially for us. We run our own work. Why would we, we could make the business the way it works for us,
yeah, I mean, not to mention like I think there's some different reasons why I fundamentally got sick, but I think about a lot of the coworkers I've seen in the workplace who work themselves into sickness.
Hmm.
And that burnout culture, hustle culture, that's a really steep price to pay, even when we're doing work that is full of purpose and meaning. And we can't abandon ourselves that way.
Yeah. And I've seen it too. I'm watching it right now with a dear friend of mine who has done animal rescue for decades, and he's very ill. And I was close to him, a couple of in the 90s, and I just like everything was for the animals, and it's tough to watch. And he's created amazing things, and also on the other side of that is really some really difficult health problems. And
And
it's
and
go
I
ahead.
think this is common in nonprofit. Like I do think there's a lot of self-work for people in nonprofit to do around why am I wired to be such a carer and helper? Why is it so important to me to help others before I just do the basics in taking care of myself? Those are serious questions I think people, the sooner you address, the better.
Yeah.
You can't keep put off having that conversation with yourself because, you know, there are lots of exploitative workplaces, but a lot of times the call is also coming from inside the
Inside, yeah.
house.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And you said that, so that's what I do. Like, when I work with executive directors and fundraisers and people who are like, you know, who feel that it's enough of this, I deserve better. And that I set the temperature, right? And you know what I mean? I said no one is going to be like, everyone will follow your lead. So if your lead is chaotic and constantly in crisis, that's what it'll happen. And I think we feel like we may be captive to this somehow, that if we're not feeling that way, we're doing it wrong. um and so I really work with people to have sovereignty over their schedule, their time, the choices. I call about sovereign, you're the queen, and I say who comes and who goes. I say how things work. If you don't have to drop everything for the board member, you know, they can get on your calendar. It's okay, and I feel like that's what, or the big donor, oh, I gotta run, like, you know.
We do a lot of putting people and issues on a pedestal
We do.
in this industry, and it just isn't serving us, and not everyone has gotten that memo yet.
Yes. And so I really work with people to like take that sovereignty, raise their standard, and then and the coolest thing is it works, you know what I mean? And now they feel more, actually the calm, confident leader they wanted to be, they always thought they would be. And that's because that's where I saw the break was people wanted, oh, if I had a brochure, I'd feel more confident. And that's it's like it's actually like, well, let's feel more confident and from there create a brochure, because that's going to be a completely different product, because we're making it from a place of excitement and possibility, right? And that's what I want people to get to. And I just realized that there was like really no one was sort of dealing with these more of the mindset issues. Everybody wanted strategy to fix a mindset, and that does not mindset work. Fix a mindset work, right?
A
You
hundred
got to just
percent.
walk through the fire.
I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about at seeing ourselves as coaches, is fundamentally, doesn't matter if you have the best operations, the best strategy. If your mindset is more, 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 more all the time, things are going to go off the rails. That's
Yeah.
not a realistic worldview to have.
Yeah. And I know you've worked with organizations. I worked with organizations that typically have gone like off the rails or whatever. And I know that's a more of a lot of what you work with organizations on. Help me understand like what happens, because I feel like a lot of this is wrapped up in the values that we hold, and those values being challenged or feeling like we have to be constantly proving ourselves or things like that. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you see in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of this is like the place that the nonprofit sector has in a capitalistic society. Like, Our work is our value. Our production is our value. That is the mindset and the ideology that we are so bought into. And while I certainly know in my heart that I've done work that has been really meaningful to others, also to myself, um, we're not just here to produce widgets, right? And when we approach work that way, because we're people who define ourselves by our work, we're really kind of tarnishing our relationship with ourselves. We're saying we're not good enough. It's the personalizing. We're not good enough if we aren't producing enough. We owe it to somebody else to produce more and more and more. Um, and I think for so many people I know, as I'm getting to like the middle stage of my career, so many of my amazingly close friends I've made through work are going through the experience of unpacking that and thinking about how do they fundamentally change their relationship to work. You know, they have suffered burnout, which is a pretty extreme thing to go through. And some of them have even experienced moral injury, which is even more harmful and lasting than burnout and something that um, can really fracture the sense of self.
And explain what moral injury means.
Yeah, so I think that difference between moral injury and burnout is pretty critical.
Okay.
So burnout is that exhaustion on every level where we just can't get out of it. Things get harder and harder to do. Our performance suffers, our attitude sucks. And that's our attitude towards ourselves and our others. You're just in the pit of despair with burnout, right? And you think the more you do, you'll climb out, but you're really just digging yourself deeper into burnout,
Hmm.
right? So moral injury, and I'm going to use this quote from The Lancet because I want to be a little specific here. It's understood to be the strong cognitive and emotional response that can occur following events that violates a person's moral or ethical code. Morally injurious events threaten one's deeply held beliefs and trust. So essentially, your entire worldview can be eroded when you suffer a moral injury because the trust you had in institutions or in people or in a community can erode. And that leads to really profound feelings of shame and guilt, distancing yourself from others. It's something that is now in the realm of study of psychologists. It's been recently added to the DSM, the
Really?
manual on
Okay.
mental health. And so there's a growing body of research, in particular, about how moral injuries affect um, veterans, so people who served, also first responders and nurses. So these are people who we actually share a lot in common with as nonprofit folks, as fundraisers. We're people who our persona is so deeply tied into our work. And our work is about protecting others or caring for others. It's about our communities. It's not just about us. So when we have these negative experiences, these moral injuries, um, it breaks down who you thought you were.
So can you give an example, like if in
Yeah.
your work? Hmm.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about, you know, some of the moral injury I've experienced personally, and I can talk a little bit about other stories people have shared with me, friends have
Yeah.
shared with me. Um, you know, as a fundraiser, I've had the experience of hearing directly from the community about how they're being harmed by our organization. And when I've brought that back, I've been told, "Well, stay in your lane. That's not your work. That's, you know, the program people, the mission people need to deal with that." Well, I'm not okay ethically with that happening in my community. It also affects my ability to fundraise. So now I'm going to be worse at my job. And I'm also feeling betrayed. You know, I think there's this common experience of nonprofits love talking about their values and what they believe in. But how many fundraisers or nonprofit workers could tell you, here's what happened in the last week that is in complete conflict with whatever those stated values are,
Yeah.
right? And for me, that led to, you know, nonstop rumination. So really bad, like mental thinking cycles of How do I fix this? How do I fix this? Problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. And there's no way to problem solve. I have had some serious health impacts at different times where your body is just screaming, this isn't right, this isn't right. And that screaming is coming from that place of that disintegration that's going on, that betrayal that's going on. And I'll say I've talked to people who've had far more extremely harmful experiences than I have. I know people who have been retaliated against when they reported sexual harassment or assault by donors in the workplace. So not only are they experiencing that harm, but then their organization pushes them out, makes them the villain.
Wow.
What do you think that does to a person?
Right.
It really makes you question everything that you believe in. And that experience of questioning everything you believe in, it is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. So I use a term called alignment, right? Alignment means like what I say and what I do are as close as possible. And a lot of times, like organizations can be out of alignment, meaning like, so I use this example. I don't want to name names, but they say we care of, strong families, but then they treat the people that work for them. Like I know so many people who quit because they had no time for their family. So you can't say, oh, we're about these strong families, but not these strong families. We're about strong families. So we create a workplace that supports strong families overall, not just our people. They got to work day and night. But these people, we care about their strong families. You see what I mean? And then you're
A
like,
hundred
whoa.
percent.
And then in the
It's
in the cognitive dissonance is just and it just makes your head a lot of times we just don't have a word for it. So it's nice to have like a word like moral injury. Okay, now I have now I have an understand. Oh, that's why that felt so bad. That
yeah,
right?
those performative gaps between what we say and what we do, I think that's probably one of the most common moral injuries for
Yes.
fundraisers and
Yeah.
nonprofit working staff. But I also think there is sometimes a skills gap there, right? Which is we did a big values exercise. We've said what we agree on are our values as an organization, but we never talked about what behaviors are in or out of line with those values. And even if we did, we don't hold people accountable. We don't create space to even just observe and point out when that is happening.
Yeah.
I think there's a big issue of conflict avoidance in the nonprofit workspace,
Absolutely.
and that culture of conflict avoidance lets it all fester.
Yeah, 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 because and that's another thing I work with people on is how to have conversations that act that where you can like have honest conversations because everyone's so nice. Like I worked with a group of sisters and everyone was so nice and and then but because they wanted to be accommodating and then actually they didn't know how to disagree. They didn't know how to and it and it does it'll take its toll because it's going to come out. You know what I'm saying? I have my own journey with conflict, right? And understanding the role of conflict. And one of my coaches, so it's like a teeter-totter, like peace and conflict, they're a balance. And so every time I enter into a little conflict, I remind myself I'm doing this because it's creating peace, right? The conflict, the small conflict is actually creating peace. Because like you talked about putting things on a pedestal, I think one of the things we put on a pedestal is the idea of peace, getting along, being nice. And what happens is that teeter-totter go crashes down, right? And the peace just comes crashing down, and the conflict is greater than ever. And this was something I learned in my own life, like in my relationship with my one of my kids, we just keep the peace at all costs. And then it turned into this huge conflict, right? And so it's like,
It's inauthentic.
yeah,
When we are keeping the peace and we're not in a safe place, we don't have that psychological safety where we can speak our minds. We're too afraid of the consequences of speaking authentically. The keeping the peace, all it does is make you feel further and further away from your center. And the further you get from your center, the more out of whack everything gets and everything becomes.
yeah, and yep, and right, and that you use the word disintegration, which I think is very aptly word. Now, you made me think of a somebody that I worked with early on, and he got what he thought was his dream job, an absolute dream job, and it turned out to be a nightmare. And he thought he was going to this beloved institution that he loved and he had committed his life to, he became the leader of. And then it turned out that he was a really great leader and who people naturally wanted to follow, and that's not what they wanted. Okay. Um, and he's just everything that you want a good leader to be. He's open, he's kind, he's vulnerable, all those things. And I tell people the most vulnerable person in the room is the most powerful person in the room. And they saw that he was kind of like amassing power and made it really difficult for him. But
Well,
that's something that, like I said,
th
took him
this
down
is
to the core of his identity. Like I said, because an institution or something that you believe in, and then or like you're it's so tied to your identity, and then that is a deep betrayal.
I want to go back to something you said about what people believe is a good leader. So a lot of people will say they believe a good leader is open, for example, but what they actually believe is they want a leader who is compliant and enforces compliance. They want command and control. They
That's what
believe
Yes.
they believe that is good
That's you're
leadership or
you're
good
describing
management.
the situation perfectly. That's what they wanted, but what they got was this person who wasn't that, and they realized how powerful that was. That was my read on
A
the
hundred
situation.
percent.
And the relationship disintegrated, because he thought this was going to be the job he was going to be in forever, right?
Because there's this big lie about, being yourself at work and our work is a family. But fundamentally, there are a large number of people in the workplace who flatten others, who dehumanize others, who value getting along and going along over everything else. And that's why, the concept of belonging at work, I actually think is really important and really connected to this. We can't be ourselves and bring our part of ourselves that connects to this in the workplace, we're shutting off a part of ourselves. That's when the
Mhm.
flattening process begins. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that people who are in out groups, disabled people, depending on your gender identity, your nationality, so on and so forth, we're at an even greater risk because we're already having to code switch or lop off parts of our identities to fit into those command and control environments. And that it leads to the severing that we're talking about, this disintegration that
Yeah.
happens,
Yeah.
that is truly traumatizing for a number of people. It isn't just a bad experience. It isn't just baggage. It's something fundamentally worse than that. Or it can be, I should say. It isn't
Yeah.
always.
So one of the things I talk about is this idea of that how you show up in one space is how you show up in every space, right? And like there's no work life and like, oh, that's about my profession, that's my private life. It's all the same, it's all you, right? And so you building skills in one area will translate to another, and building awareness, and consciousness in one area, it's all just you, right? And it's all this, but allowing somebody in their full self to show up, that's so powerful. Like you're just getting the best of everyone, right? It's like the five, going back to the five T's, how we started this, like you're pulling
Yeah,
that out of everyone around you.
exactly. I mean, it's the basics of employee engagement. And what I'll say a lot of this boils down to is the platinum rule, which lots of people still haven't heard of. So, the golden rule is treat others as you want to be treated. Oh, okay, sure, maybe that's a good place to start, but that's actually can be really cruel. People are different. They want to be treated different ways, and we should acknowledge that. Just like good leadership is acknowledging your employees' different motivations, right? That is the platinum rule. We want to treat people the way they want to be treated. We want to honor them. We want to acknowledge them. We don't want to just dismiss them and act like our way is the only way. We're on some higher moral plane, whatever. No.
Yeah. And you're right, because so what is the platinum rule? Explain to me the platinum rule again.
Oh, did I not explicitly say that? Treat
Uh-uh.
others as they want to be
Treat
treated.
others as they want to be treated. Right, because you don't, because if I right, that's about me, right? The golden rule is about me, but this platinum rule, that's about them. you know. It may
Exactly.
not be what's right for me, but it's what's right for them, you
And
know.
this is where it connects to like that values articulation and that alignment that you talked about. Let's say that we have a shared value in our organization of authenticity. Well, what the heck does that mean to you versus me? Do we actually think that's the same thing? We need to talk about what that means to each of us so
Yeah.
that our behavior can then honor that shared value.
Yes, and that because the behaviors that actually will support, right, and bring the values like to life, right, like putting them into action. That's where it is. We can talk about it all the time. So I'm gonna have two more questions for you. The first question is like, we've been talking a lot about the values and all this thing, and how do you work with your clients, and how do you help them, using these techniques and this approach, and what does that look like to work with you?
Yeah, you know, I would say it kind of depends on where people are in their career and in their journey. And so some of this really with the coaching hat is about observing and putting a name to what is going on. Um, if you're in a combative workplace, if you're experiencing a moral injury in the workplace, your vision gets really cloudy.
Yeah.
I think it's also common that you are acting out, essentially. You are no longer able to behave in line with your own code because of how the disintegration that's going on, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think for some people, just having the place to name this, observe it, is really where the game is. Now, when it comes to how do you move on from that, it's this values change management process, right? We need to articulate what these values are. We need to articulate what behavior is or isn't in line with those. And as peer, I guess, enforcers, we need to hold each other and ourselves accountable to what we have deemed aligned action, right? So
Hmm.
walking through that process, because we can sit here and we can talk about our values. Maybe it'll feel good for a couple days, but down the line, if we're not acting in line with that, it is going to feel way worse than if we never even talked about it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. And so creating a culture where you're like, where that just becomes information instead of judgment or punishment. Like, whoa, hold on, is this what we really want? And I think that is because a lot of times this then becomes like judgment and punishment, not like that's some really good information. This is,
Yeah.
like the idea of just being curious and instead of judgmental. And then you talked about the power of just observation, of just taking back and just watching what's going on. And I think sometimes that's for people like you and me, we can see it a lot more clearly especially when people are in a very injured, disintegrated place. It's really hard to make these, to see like what they say, you can't see the label of the jar you're in. Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty common to experience gaslighting when you're going through this. So that, or if you're familiar with the phrase Darvo, you've heard
Oh
about
yeah.
that
Yes, yes.
concept. It gets really tricky to know what's going on. And, one of the questions I like to have people consider is it me? So if you're somebody who's constantly thinking about how you could have done things, 1 to 5% better, the problem probably isn't you. The problem is the person you're dealing with who has never considered if they're the issue.
Right. Because if you're considering if you're the issue, you're probably not the issue, right now. Because we brought it up, I just want to make sure we define DARVO, which is deny attack, and then reverse victim offender, which is a really common technique of people with, I don't want to label somebody like, I don't know, but like a narcissistic trait of somebody. So you bring up a thing and they deny it and then they attack you, reversing then they become the victim. And I call it like triangulation a lot, where you play the hero, the victim, and the villain, and you get triangulated. It's all sort of the same principle. And I think it's really important you can really depersonalize what's happening and see more clearly some of the ways that people are operating.
100%. And this goes back to what we were talking about, even with platinum rule and golden rule. Not to label somebody a narcissist, but it is narcissistic behavior to center your preferences and your values above everyone else all the time.
Yeah.
To not believe that other people's point of view is just as valid as yours, that is a narcissistic action. And so the whole "is it you" question can be eye-opening for some.
Yes. I think it's part of it is just be willing to ask it. This is part of doing the work, right?
Hmm.
All right. This has been a wonderful conversation. Anything else that that you would want to share with the fundraisers and nonprofit leaders out here listening?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a wide-ranging conversation, and I'm talking about this issue more and more. And what's fascinating about it, but I think what's also challenging about it is how much there's all these interconnections. We talked about the scarcity mindset. We talked about this narcissistic leadership. We talked about alignment. These are the things that fundamentally determine what our day-to-day experience and our day-to-day production is like in the nonprofit world. We don't get into these heady conversations and then talk about how that actually connects to our behavior and act in line with those. Nothing is ever going to change. It's the definition of insanity, right?
Right.
Um, so I just want to encourage people, maybe it's your personal board of directors, maybe it's your trusted colleague at work. Maybe you're not ready to have a full-on team conversation about these topics yet. Start getting into it because this is really, I think, the fundamentals of our work as fundraisers. This understanding of you are not me. And it sounds really simple, but people oftentimes assume other people are like them. And as fundraisers who are here to understand others and connect them to something bigger than ourselves,
Hmm.
we can't afford to do that. We're not going to be successful if we keep doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just job one, right? Like nothing's gonna happen if you don't get that right. You know,
Yep.
the relationship will not connect or grow. If all right, this has been amazing. If you listened, you already know I end on the same question, which I am going to remember to ask this one though, which is you're in Albuquerque, I'm in St. Louis, but
Mm,
hey, we wind up at an AFP conference or whatever. We're
yeah.
at a karaoke bar. What's your go-to song, Perry? What are you going to sing?
Oh no. This has been a journey for me figuring out the answer to this question because, spending most of my life in LA, spending a lot of time in karaoke bars in K-Town. The answer then is not the answer now because my relationship and view of those artists has dramatically changed over time,
Okay.
for the worse. So it's a journey, and I'm figuring that out.
Okay.
I would encourage suggestions, and I'll say I am somebody who cares about music a lot. Last year, I tracked all the songs stuck in my head. There were 81 different songs that were stuck in my head that I could remember to track. So maybe that's a good place to
So like
start.
when you would think of a song, you would say, "Oh, I'm thinking of this song. I'm gonna."
Yeah, that was one of my goals for the year, is just tracking the songs stuck in my head.
Wow. Maybe you would just sing the one that was stuck in your head the most. I don't know.
Yeah, honestly, I had the flu over the holidays, so I was in like the flu mental breakdown of a holiday song not leaving my head, so I would not choose that one, honestly.
I don't know. You could just do Don't Stop Believing, you know. That's always a good one. I love that you're a deep thinker on this one. Um, yeah,
Too deep,
yeah,
possibly.
yeah, yeah. That we're going back some decades here and thinking it through. Uh, well, I just love karaoke, and I think it's one of my favorite means of self-expression. So I always just
Brings
like to ask.
brings people together.
It sure does. It's like singing around, sitting around. It's like the version of, sitting around singing around a piano.
Hmm.
It is the uniter. And a lot of what I coach people on is like letting go of the outcome and we're like releasing the need to control
Mm,
and trying something new and stepping into discomfort. And karaoke does all of those things. So
sure does. Sure
yeah, sure
does.
does. Well, okay, this has been wonderful, Perry. Thank you so much. The time just flew. If people want to get in touch with you, what I'll have all the things in your show notes. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, come to radphilanthropy.com. Join my newsletter. You'll even see the archive there has that list of those 81 songs stuck in my head. It's burning for you to know what those were. I made a
I
whole
am very
spreadsheet.
curious. Yeah, so your newsletter, you offer practical tips on fundraising and nonprofit culture. It seems like you have a lot of information to share. So we will put that link in the show notes. It's radphilanthropy.com/newsletter, but don't worry about it. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Harry, it's been so wonderful having you here. Thank you. It's been wonderful to get to know you.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you embracing this conversation and all the dimensions of it.
You bet. And that's it for this episode of The Influential Nonprofit. And if you want to connect with me, my info is also in the show notes. When you're ready to step into your sovereign self and become the leader you've always wanted, just reach out and I'm here for you. We'll see you next time.